Right, you ready to talk some films?
Yes.
Films and TV. I know it's something you've always enjoyed. Why don't we go ahead and start with some background information about both of us? My name is Nathan, and I am joined by my dad. This is going to be our podcast where we're going to talk about films and television, maybe break down some in just a fun sense, but otherwise we're just going to kind of generally talk about what we like, what we don't like, and just kind of have a whale of a time.
Yep, that's for sure what we're going to be doing.
So,
And
Dad,
I'm Mark.
yep, that's right. Of course, they can't call you Dad. That just wouldn't work, would it?
No, no.
I'll have to see about getting you a better microphone sometime as well, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I can look into it.
Yeah,
If that'll make a difference.
I mean, when I do hear you quite well, it sounds great, so I think it's going to be fine. We can always just adjust
Okay.
how to record stuff in the future, but it shouldn't really be a problem. Anyway, should we start with a bit of background about kind of how you got really into films?
Yeah. How I got into films.
Yeah. Go ahead and just give us a bit of background information into you, Dad, and yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess I've been a big fan of movies and films since I was a kid, really. And I've always watched films. I've always been fascinated by films. And back when I was a kid, there was only three channels on TV, and whenever you got to see films, they would always, if it on TV, they would always going to be at least 10 years old. So you got two choices for watching films. You either watch the film on TV, which was at least 10 years old on one of three channels, and so therefore you might get to see an option to see about 10 to 20 films a week, or you went to the cinema and watched films which were brand new. But I was so super fascinated, and I came across this book when I was a kid in W.H. Smith. So I don't know if do we get paid for saying that?
No,
Is that
no, no.
product placement? We should
That's
get sponsored for that. So
if
I was in W.H. Smith, and I found this. I used to love to go to on a Saturday and browse through all the books. And I found this book called Films on TV, or like a guide to films on TV, which is like kind of a thick book, which was full of titles of films. And I thought, hey, this is going to give me a chance to look through and browse through and see some films which look appealing to me. So I watch out for when they come out on TV, and I can watch them. And I just absolutely loved this book, and I became totally fascinated, and it just got me more and more interested. And another thing I'd do as a kid, I'd go down to the library, local library, and spend hours in the reference section where they had books on. They had like annual books, yearly books on the films that came out each year, going back to the 50s and 60s. And I used to read through and look at I was just absolutely fascinated by films, and I wanted to get to know. I watched a few films, the few films that I was able to see, but I just became very, very fascinated, and it kind of started there. And when I got to be in the 80s, when I got married, video started to come out. A lot more channels came out. Later on, we had satellite TV, and then the whole thing exploded, and it just became more and more exciting for somebody like me, who was a movie buff and just wanted access to more and more films. And now, of course, just unlimited access. So if you start out with such a you're interested in something, but you have such limited access to it, and you go for years in that situation, kind of craving watching more and more of this art form, and then all of a sudden the culture changes, the society changes, and technology changes, and all of a sudden you got access to thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, almost one a day, more than that actually, more than one film a day is being released as I speak. I've been has been for quite some time. So many films being released these days. It's just an endless source of just fun stuff. So kind of that's kind of my background and how I've got into films. What about yourself, Nathan?
Well, being your son, naturally you had quite an influence over me growing up. You and Mum, especially. And what I've always found interesting was because I remember we used to love just having a family movie night. We'd always just watch kind of films together and stuff, whether it was all of us or just like you, me, Mum, or you, me, or just me and Mum, depending on what the film was. Because Mum, particularly, she back when we used to watch film when I was younger, she would always like show me the scarier kind of films. Not that you didn't like the scary films, but there were some that maybe you were just like, I don't really want to watch that again, or it's got too many jump scares kind of stuff, which is fair enough. I feel like too many jump scares can really ruin a film. It's just a cheap gimmick, isn't it? But I know with you like the more you've got such a broad sense of what you really, really enjoy about films, and there's always something that you can get out of every single film that you've ever seen. And quite frankly, I mean, your extensive knowledge of different actors and different kind of roles. You've got different directors. You could even recognize scenery and stuff. It's just so fascinating to hear. I remember when you used to run your DVD cafe, and anybody would come in and think, oh, I'm looking for this film. It's got Joaquin Phoenix in or something, and you'd be able to list off just like numerous films, like, oh, he was good in this one. He was good in this one. You're able to help these people. And it was just so incredible to see. And I'm like, wow, you could tell. Well, I mean, like you put it best, you're such a movie buff, and that it's really rubbed off on me in years, because I like to believe I like many different genres. I don't like every single genre of film. Like I could skip some, for the rest of my life, and I wouldn't feel like I'd missed out, because some of them just feel very, very samey these days. That's the only problem with having so many films coming out all the time now, or even television shows. Another great example, the fact that the market is just becoming so, there's no real original good ideas. You're really lucky if you find one that you're like, oh wow, this has really kept me going. But I do try to keep an optimistic mind when watching films, and be like, oh well, look, it might feel cliche, it might feel like it's been done before, but sometimes you get a little surprised, and sometimes you're like, well, you know what, they did it really well, they did it different enough that you still can enjoy it, and some people can really surprise you, which is why I always believe it's good to check out stuff even if it feels like it's going to be exactly the same that you've seen.
Yeah, exactly. Which speaking of genres, which are your favorite genres?
If
Would you say?
If I had to, that is a tough one. There's quite a few. Like, I suppose the ones that I like the most.
Which are your favorite genres?
So it's quite tough for me to pick a favorite. I find that to be a very normal thing in my life, because I do try to be very easily pleased, which is very true if you know me. But if I did have to pick, I would pick probably ones that I do tend to gravitate towards, which tend to be more along the lines of like sci-fi, fantasy, are probably ones that I heavily lean into. Other than that, I do enjoy. I mean, who doesn't like a good comedy? Even if it's not a great comedy, it could be like a B comedy, it could be a shit comedy. But sometimes those give you great laughs. So I do enjoy comedy, especially depending on who's in it. But that's personal taste, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think action's always a good shout. Sometimes you're just in the mood to watch a Mission Impossible or a Lethal Weapon or something like that. Die Hard. Those are just the stereotypical action franchises, which although they do repeat after a while, they're still entertaining to watch. So I think those would be, if I had to say my top three, those would probably be the top three.
Right. Well, for me, it would be. I mean, sci-fi probably is my favorite genre. I also like biopics, films of people's lives, stories about people's lives.
Yeah,
I'm kind of a fan of those as well. I also like fantasy, like yourself, and horror. But action, actually, is one of my least favorite genres. Oddly enough, but I'll watch an action film, and there are some action films out there that I really enjoy, and sometimes I'm in the mood for. Certainly, an action adventure kind of movie.
Oh, definitely.
And I like superhero movies, which tend to be very much, filled with action. But generally speaking, there's a lot of like kind of violent action films that I'm not mad about. Not like, for example, the Speed series. What is it? Not the Speed series. What's it called?
Yeah, I was about to say that's not very violent. No,
it's not violent. It just I've never watched it because it just doesn't appeal. It's not even the violence thing. It's just it doesn't appeal. Sometimes films, as you say, not just in the action genre, but sometimes films can get very formulaic. I think this is a problem for superhero movies. I'm a fan, as you know, I've always been a fan of comics since being a kid. So I'm a fan of superhero movies to a very large extent, but they're getting very formulaic, even more as we go along. They're becoming very samey. It's the same story, watching with different costumes and different characters, and it's getting a little bit tiresome. So I'm not I'm less interested in that. Thrillers are good as well. I'm a big fan of thrillers, especially
Thrillers, yeah.
psychological thrillers.
Oh, yeah.
And
I just
I like the oldies. What me and your mum have in common, because me and your mum have got very somewhat different tastes, as you know. And as you're saying, she's big on the horror, and she likes the gore as well, and she likes murder kind of mysteries and that kind of stuff.
that's where I get that taste from.
We overlap. Yeah, absolutely. Well, where we overlap, we try to find stuff that we both like. The places where we intersect, our tastes intersect, would be horror. But I'm interested in paranormal horror, like ghostly horror. I don't like the slasher stuff.
I get that.
And then the oldies, I just like the classic. I like classic movies, film noir,
Oldies but goldies,
thrillers.
yeah.
It can be anything. It can be anything. It can be comedy. Like you said, I'm a big fan of comedies as well. I'll watch comedy anytime. But I think I've got a fairly, as you say, I've got a fairly broad taste. But if I was going to pick out some specific ones, it would probably be sci-fi biopic and probably the ghost kind of films, that kind of thing, or the superhero films.
Yeah, I get that. It's crazy, isn't it? Because when we really, especially because you brought up superhero, like back in the day, that wasn't really a genre. You know, it wasn't so big enough that you could classify it. I think it just kind of fell under different categories depending on what direction it really leaned into. I think it was more like fantasy still, and yet now it's like it's such a normal thing. You're right. It is basically a genre these days.
It's because of the lack of back in the day. The reason why it wasn't a big thing back in the day is because they just didn't have the technology or sophistication. So they'd make, if you watch, there's a Spider-Man movie from I think it's the 90s, 80s or 90s. I think it was 80s or 90s. One of the first Spider-Man movies.
Is it the Sam Raimi ones with Tobey Maguire, or before that?
No. Before that, long before
okay.
that. There's about a decade or so before that, they made a Spider-Man movie, and it was a TV movie, but it was just so cheesy. The special effects were so cheesy. It's the best, but it's the best they could do. So part of the reason why you didn't have that superhero genre, or it wasn't so big prior to, let's say, 2000, and Marvel struggled. They struggled to kind of bring themselves, because they're a perfect fit for the cinema screen, but they struggled to get, that, even that they tried for decades, but they struggled, and they really were struggling, and they actually went bankrupt at one point. And part of the reason for that is that just the technology wasn't there to be able to show the full effect, the full sense of the fantasy that comes in comics, that makes comics fun and enjoyable. But it is now.
Right. Yeah, it's quite incredible, because I think another great way of talking about formulaic, because especially with Marvel being so well known these days, whether they're well liked or not depends on the person and stuff. But the fact that they are now owned by Disney and they have such big funding and backing, and they're making just constant television shows. They're making like 4 films a year and stuff. They're putting out so much more content than they used to be able to, and quite frankly, a lot of it is really good. But like you say, it does feel formulaic at one point, where it's like, there's going to be a hero, there's going to be a villain, there's going to be stuff in between, but ultimately it's always that same recipe. There might be growth, there might be new characters and stuff, but it's always going to be the same recipe no matter what kind of superhero film it is, or even television show. It's just always that same recipe, which is, can still be entertaining to watch, but it's true where you're like, nothing's really going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, it gets tiresome after a while, because you start thinking, well, it's the same story. What I find interesting in, so one of my favourite superheroes is Spider-Man. Well, he's my favourite superhero since being a kid. And what I find interesting is nowadays is comparing the different iterations of the Spider-Man, because it's been rebooted so many times, the franchise.
Absolutely.
And not even including the one that I mentioned there.
That's right.
And so
that
what's
would have been
fascinating about
hilarious if they put him in it.
Oh yeah, well, the guy must be ancient now. I can't remember who played the part.
Yeah, but
anyway, it was. We saw the latest Spider-Man, and it was good to see. Wasn't it a couple of weeks ago when see the three reboot characters, the 3 actors all kind of being used, and that was quite fascinating. I think it is interesting to compare the approaches that each reboot or each director or each production crew has taken.
Yeah.
To the series.
Quite right, and then even different villains from. I mean, the idea for that one I think was much better. It was far more inclusive, and then they're still keeping it with the whole they're trying to, start beginning their new phases so they can start focusing on like bigger baddies and bring in more characters. I like the direction they take it. I like the way especially the film itself felt. It was really entertaining to watch. Could have had a little bit more interaction between the Spider-Man, in my opinion, but it felt a little lackluster where they're like, oh hey, just for anybody who hasn't seen it at this point, it's ridiculous. Just opens up a portal. Oh, conveniently you get both the Peter Parkers just like that, and then it's just all nonchalant and chill. But like you're more than halfway through the film at this point. It's like, well, they're not really bringing too much more to it. Like, yeah, you're gonna get a great scene, you're gonna get some great fight with it, but that's kind of all that's bringing to it, which was it was a bit of a shame. They couldn't have been a little bit more based on their own personal growth and their battles. But even the fact that I think Tobey Maguire was probably the fan favorite to come back, sadly, compared to Andrew Garfield, even though they both were great Spider-Man in their own different ways, just like how Tom Holland is yet again another great Spider-Man, but in his own distinct way, because he's like a younger guy, and you can tell that they're all different versions of Spider-Man, just like how there's different versions of Spider-Man in the older comics, because you've got like the Amazing Spider-Man, the Ultimate Spider-Man, the Spider-Man, and then it gets so confusing after a point, the amount of different Spider-Man and Spider-Verses and this, that, the other. But I do appreciate the fact that, like you said, they were able to make a really good film out of it, and I'm glad they didn't do any recasting. I think that was probably the biggest thing for me, keeping everybody basically the way they were, which was great. Honestly, really good for them to do that.
Yeah, me too. No, I think it was good that they did that. They tipped a nod to those earlier versions, as we discussed anyway. I think for me, out of the most recent franchises of this millennium, shall we say, the Tobey Maguire one was the one for me, which is I like the best, probably because it was pleasantly surprising. I remember when you were a kid, when we were in the States, when we watched it on when it first came out. It was pleasantly surprising to me because I was quite excited because it was actually quite close to the comic, the most close to the comic I'd seen any.
It felt like
so to that
the
point,
technology was finally there. It might not have been like perfect to everybody, but quite frankly, it was one of the best superhero films because it was like, oh my god, we've actually reached the stage where we can do superhero and we can do it well, and it just felt right. I agree. The Tobey Maguire, all three of them, quite frankly, I really enjoyed those.
Yeah, absolutely, me too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the details. I'm on IMDb as we speak, and I'm trying to find.
So I think it was Sam Raimi who I don't know if he directed all three of the Tobey Maguire.
No, Sam Raimi directed the Tobey Maguire one.
Yeah, that's right. But I don't know if he directed all three of the Tobey Maguire ones.
No, he might not have done. But I'm looking for the one that preceded that. I'm looking for the TV movie I was referring to earlier, so I can give you a bit more detail on that. But it's hard to find.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to know.
On IMDb. There's so much Spider-Man stuff out there.
That's true. There is tons of it.
Anyway.
I mean, they even had like older television shows with Spider-Man, I think back in like the 90s as well. Animated series.
Yeah, and I think, the TV movie I was talking about was based on the live-action TV series, which, again, it was, even though it's kind of cheesy, not very good special effects, it was still brilliant to us because we had nothing else.
Yeah.
there was nothing, nobody had attempted to make, apart from cartoons, there'd been no attempt to kind of really make movies out of Marvel.
Quite right.
So
cartoons gave them such a great medium to even try to fill in those gaps until they could actually start doing proper live action. Because I mean, now it's just like DC, Marvel, like just constantly putting out stuff now. It's so different compared to like you said back then, where if anything did come out, it was going to be like I think another great example is the Adam West days when he was Batman. Hilariously cheesy. Obviously not great like special effects and stuff, but for the time, it was just like, oh my god, we have a comic book character played by this, like Adam West, who obviously, later on in his life became like such an icon and a legend. Like, who didn't know Adam West? But even back then, it was just such an unbelievable thing for such a high. I don't know how much of a high role actor he was back then, but I can imagine, he must have still done quite a few things at that time. And then they're like, yeah, let's get Adam West to play Batman. and it was just unheard of to get such an amazing role in like that. I mean, anybody who's anybody that knows Batman, that knows Adam West, they remember all that. It's just incredible. But you're right; it was a very different time.
Yeah, and it generally was, and again, that is a good example of, I think, something. Again, in my opinion, even though it was very, very cheesy, it was a comic. It was a comic adaptation to TV or to film, which actually worked really well because it was silly, but it was somewhat loyal to the comic, and it was bringing these comics to life in a quite a successful way, even though it was very silly. Obviously, it's very silly and very cheesy.
Yeah, it was definitely silly and cheesy. I mean, they did the typical comic book like pow, like the I don't know what they call them, like the little like interjection screen pop up things whenever they would hit a bad guy or something. It's just hilarious, but it's it made it feel like it was this is meant to be silly, goofy. It's a comic book. Obviously, it's not taken seriously, but they really played into that, and I thought that was just the right way to do it. And
yeah.
Oh, so sorry. You carry on.
No, I was going to say that's another example of Batman is another example of a great kind of comic book superhero there have been so many variations of it over the decades.
That's quite
going back from even before the 60s, the Batman was even back to the 40s. There was a Batman serial. It's very different. I mean, Batman character did exist back then, but and he's got kind of the cape and stuff like that. And I think Robin is also involved in some of the series, some of those 40s serials. He's basically the detective. He's nothing more than a detective. So it's quite interesting to see how that's evolved over the years from the 40s to the 60s, kind of the Adam West stuff, and then when Tim Burton got a hold of it in the 80s, and we had a bit more of the special effects going on, a bit more of the technology being used.
And started going down a slightly darker route as well, didn't it?
Yeah,
I wouldn't say like super dark, but still, compared to Adam West, it was like this is a completely different character.
No, it definitely went down a darker route, and it was as a result of the graphic. What was happening in the comic scene. So more so than the movie scene is kind of what triggered it. So there was the comic, the graphic novel version of Batman, the Dark Knight. When that came out, Frank Miller, as a kind of proper writer, started to get involved in scripting comics, both for Marvel and DC. And he came out with the graphic novel. This is around similar sort of time frame as when The Watchmen came out. So graphic novels became kind of a new thing, and it was designed to bring comics to an adult audience, and especially adults who had grown up with comics in the 60s and 70s, like my generation. Well, it was kind of they were being lost. That audience was being lost, and so the graphic novels kind of were designed to bring them back in again and take it in a new direction. So we had kind of a darker storyline, and so when Tim Burton's Batman came, it wasn't based on the Dark Knight per se, because we had the Dark Knight as a movie later on with the the more recent iteration
with
Christian Bale was Batman.
Yeah, definitely one of the best.
And Chris Nolan, his stuff as a director that he did, but it did kind of match. It was kind of timed, and it did similar sort of timeline as when the graphic novels came out, and the darker storylines like the Killing Joke used to were coming out, and so it was deliberately going down a bit more of a darker path. Even with Tim Burton's going to do that anyway. That's what's going to appeal to him anyway, isn't it?
No, absolutely. But it's so strange about Tim Burton because he loves, and obviously lives and feeds off of the whole dark narrative, and yet, like any of his films that you watch, any of like the animations or things he does, it'll feel dark, but it'll still feel goofy, and it's just so interesting that he's able to bring those together in such a way that you immediately can see anything, and if you have no idea it was Tim Burton, you're like, that's got to be a Tim Burton thing. You just immediately know. It's incredible. He's got such a distinct taste.
Yeah. Absolutely right. So I found this original Spider-Man movie I'm talking about. It was actually the 70s, believe it or not. It came out in the TV series from 77 to 79. And you're probably not going to know any of the actors. I certainly don't even know the actors. Peter Parker was played by Nicholas Hammond.
Okay, no,
There's
no idea.
there's nobody there. I'm looking through to see if there's anybody there that I would recognise even today, or even back then. To be honest, they weren't massive big names. I was thinking that J. Jonah Jameson might have been played by somebody. No, not massive. No, Robert F. Simon played J. Jonah Jameson. No, I don't really recognise any of the as I go through the cast on this. Any of the actors.
There's no names that pop out. You think they'd have like one biggish, depending on their budget, obviously.
Yeah,
because that would just help if you had a biggish name.
They were all like TV.
Like TV actors and stuff of the time. I get you. Hang on just a minute. You've cut out. I'll try reconnecting.
Worth a look.
Oh,
worth a look, just to get a sense of, where. Yeah, you'll see right away that they're lacking the technology. They're lacking without CGI and without a whole heck of other stuff in special effects. It's hard to get the feel of the comic across. So around that same sort of time, you had the Incredible Hulk TV series.
Yeah,
which was. I want to say that was Patrick Duffy.
So different. God, I don't remember who the first Hulk was now, but I do remember some scenes of the television show.
It's Bill Bixby. Bill Bixby, and Lou Ferrigno. Now these guys, to this day,
Lou Ferrigno is a name I recognise.
Yeah, Lou Ferrigno has become. He played the Hulk when he was properly, all greened and when he the muscular Hulk. He played the guy.
Right.
He played the Hulk, right? Bill Bixby played David Banner. And Bill Bixby at the time was well known anyway. He was already on TV. He was in the TV series called
David
Magician.
Banner.
Yeah, I know. The actual comics is actually Bruce Banner, but they call him for whatever reason they call him David Banner in the TV series.
They had like a slight change. I get. It happens. I get you. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know if it was like a brother or they tried to rope in like a dad or something else. That's fine. Okay, so he had a different name for a time. Okay.
But again, you have a look at you'll see, without the special effects, it's really, really hard to get the excitement. It was very popular, of course, with young kids, people like myself, not that young, I was a teenager at that point, but with young kids and fans of the comics, of course, it was popular. But it was really, really, nowhere near getting the impact of the comics. But Lou Ferrigno, he's become a legend. It's a bit like the guy that played, what was his name, who played Flash Gordon in the movie Flash, 1980 movie Flash. He's become a bit of a household name, hasn't he? He's got a cult following.
Oh my god, I can see him. Oh my god.
When you're armed with the IMDb, it's quite easy.
Yeah, hang on. We can have a look.
As I am.
Yeah, we have to look. It's fine.
I think it's Dan Jones, isn't it?
Sam Jones.
Sam Jones. That's it.
Sam Jones. Oh my god! Oh, even Brian Blessed. I forgot he was in it. Yeah.
Yeah, he was in that bird. That wings. Was winged character. Lord, what's his face or whatever his name was.
Yeah, Prince Fulton.
That'll be it. Yeah. Well, I can't say I took it very seriously.
No. But I mean, that's the beauty of it. Like when they know they're meant to be goofy and they don't take themselves seriously, sometimes that's what makes it perfect. And yeah, it wasn't the best film, but it was still it was still entertaining. It
was fun. It had some good production values. It was quite interesting, and
and a good cast. I mean,
it's absolutely the sci-fi and the superhero genre.
Yeah, and it was Timothy Dalton. I mean, you've got Robbie Coltrane.
Yeah.
You've got quite a few good profile people in there.
There were some stars in that.
Yeah, it was. They definitely had the budget apparently.
They definitely put some money into it. They did a good job with it, and they had Queen do the theme tune, which to this day is still big. So.
Oh god, exactly. I mean, can you imagine having such a big name artist do a theme tune for you? It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, Flash Gordon, and actually, obviously, it was a tip in a nod to not so much a comic book as again another 40s serial, which was a real sci-fi series. I mean, Flash Gordon was it's off planet, Whereas the Batman
Was
the
just
40 series of the
Earth
Batman. You
in a
watch that.
different way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a detective series, and the main detective is just wearing a cape. That's all. So, and there's quite a few of now these days. I've started to find on YouTube a lot of the old serials from the 40s, and there was quite a few different characters like that. There were detectives that had unusual costumes or wore masks or whatever.
Yeah.
That was just a bit of a gimmick. There was still just detective series. But in the Flash Gordon of the 40s, the 40s serial, at least they were going off planet. They had the little amazingly bad special effects for the spacecraft and stuff like that. But at least it was there. There you go. Look, see, Max von Sydow played the Emperor Ming in Flash Gordon, and Max von Sydow is a very, very respectable actor. I mean, he played Jesus in The Greatest Story Ever Told. He played one of my favorite classic films that is called The Seventh Sign.
Seventh Sign, okay.
Seventh Sign, yeah. The Seventh Sign. Let me just double check that. No, it's not The Seventh Sign. What am I talking about? Seventh Seal. The Seventh Seal from 1957.
Okay, yeah,
where he plays a crusader coming home from. It's a Swedish film with subtitles, but he plays a crusader coming home from the Crusades, and just kind of coming to terms with the Black Death. We come back to his hometowns and villages around where his country, where people are, and finding lots and lots of death and questioning. It's a philosophical film. It's quite an interesting, dark film. But that's a really, really cool film worth watching, worth taking a look at. And also he was in. You'll also remember Max von Sydow from Shutter Island, because he was in Shutter Island. He played the one of the professors that was an former Nazi or whatever. If you remember, have you watched?
Yeah, I've seen Shutter Island. It's been a while since I've seen it. I think I saw it once, but yeah,
right. If you vaguely remember it was about.
We'll have to rewatch.
They go to this without doing too many spoilers. They go to the island. They find this. They find that basically there's all kinds of weird stuff going on, and one of the things that's going on relates to this.
Yeah, because it was a Leo DiCaprio movie, wasn't it? That's right.
It was, yeah.
And
it was.
And according to Mum's philosophy, if it's Leonardo DiCaprio, we have to watch it.
Oh yeah.
To be fair, he does a lot of good films.
He does. Yeah, I've not done many. I don't think there's any films that he's made, because of course, back in the day, especially, I was forced to always go and watch films when they came out with him.
Yeah,
but
at least he was a good actor, but still is, obviously, and does great. He does some really good films. Did you see his new?
He seems to pick up.
Did you see his new Netflix one?
No, I started to watch it. We did watch it, but I didn't have, for whatever reason, I can't remember why I couldn't finish watching it. But it's kind of a comedy, isn't it?
It's so strange, right? Because at moments it makes me feel like a Quentin Tarantino kind of vibe, and at other moments it's just like a science-y, really kind of out there, we're going to save humanity kind of film. But then it does none of that. And it never really quite lands on what exactly it wants to be. It's just like, you're seeing a lot of people's different experiences, and I did like it. I don't exactly know why I liked it, but there were also parts that I didn't like. It was very, I don't know, it felt like it never really figured out what it wanted to do. But I appreciate the fact they tried to have a very profound message in it, and I think that's important. I don't think it's going to land across with everybody.
Yeah, it took me a minute to realise that it was a comedy, first of all, because it started off, it seemed a little bit serious at the start, and then I started to realise it was a comedy, and a dark comedy, and a topical, covering a lot of topical issues. But you're right. I think it has a bit of an identity problem. I think part of it is Leo himself. Of course, he never plays a bad role. He never plays a bad part.
No, but he did very well.
Here, he's almost like he was playing the part of another actor. There's a very specific style to the character that he was playing, which I think there's two or three other actors that I think would really perfectly fit that slot. I mean, comedy actors.
Yeah.
The role that Leo played, he never plays a bad role. He's a brilliant actor anyway, and he fits anyway. But it's almost like he was playing the part of a comedy actor, because that role was a comedy role. It was a role for a proper comic actor, somebody who is normally in that type of a role.
Yeah, and they play that stereotype.
People like Jeff Goldblum or I would say even Jack Black to some extent. People like that would fit Philip Seymour Hoffman back, when he was still alive. It's people that would be, kind of that uncomfortable, nerdy, geeky kind of, professor who. But I liked his treatment of it, but I still think it could have been cast differently. But the fact that he was cast in it, I'm sure that was part of the reason for that was Netflix wanted to. Well, they've got a bunch of big names. They've got Jennifer Lawrence. Again, same thing with Jennifer Lawrence. I mean, a few different people could have played that role, but she owned it because, like Leo, and like Meryl Streep, they could turn their craft to anything, can't they? So they've got those skills.
Quite right. Because I mean, like I said, Meryl Streep, another great example. I think they had was it Kate Blanchett? I think was in it as well, or am I misremembering that?
Kate Winslet, yeah.
Kate Winslet, yeah. So, yeah,
so it was, not Kate Winslet, Kate Blanchett, sorry.
It was Kate Blanchett. Okay, so yeah, so obviously like her and Meryl Streep, big, high name actresses, and then you've got Jennifer Lawrence, more up and coming, but still, like you know if she's in something, it's probably going to be quite good. You've got so many good names. Even Timothée Chalamet's in it. You've got Jonah Hill. You've got a big cast of it's quite clear they had
huge,
the
Mike
reach
Reynolds,
and the power.
Mike Reynolds, for God's sake. Ron Perlman. I mean, these are big names. Even the lesser roles played by big names.
Yeah, and yeah, you're quite right. They could have had. I mean, obviously Leo did a fantastic job because that's just what he does. He learns the role, he plays the role, he portrays the role, he does it so well. But you're right. Somebody else could have done that role and probably would have done it justice, the way it probably would have felt. But at the same time, it's like
I think what would have happened is it might have had a better identity if it was cast differently. Instead of using huge stars like it did, which of course will have got the audience anyway, which was the goal of the producers. But instead of using them, if it used people that normally you would expect to see in those roles, it would have been much more obviously a comedy, and it probably would have been funnier. You would have got a bit more comic timing. You'd got a bit better. You'd have just been a bit more familiar, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think you're quite right. Yeah.
Having said that, I didn't watch it all, and I need to watch it all because it did look quite fun. And I was just getting into it, and I can't remember, for whatever reason, I couldn't finish watching it.
I mean, it's certainly quite something, and I am glad I finished it, mostly because I can remember, especially the highlights in my mind, is how I like to remember it. Because some films you're not going to remember every single aspect, but it's good for at least to remember some of the highlights. So you're like, okay, I remember this happened to so and so, or this happened. It's good to kind of recollect on that, and it definitely achieves in the film what it was trying to achieve, but it still absolutely took the dark route, which I think is important. I think it's good that they did that. The comedy aspect, whether it's dark comedy, any kind of comedy, because especially Jonah Hill, he just does anything to have a laugh, and it's just in that film he falls incredibly flat.
So he's perfectly cast for this kind of film because he's funny. You expect I know he's played some serious parts, and he does that well as well.
Yeah.
But you're not going to feel. It's not going to be surprising to see him in a funny role, and he's going to make you laugh because he's just naturally funny.
That's just what he does. No, it's quite right. I mean, another great example is 21 or even 22 Jump Street. Him and Channing Tatum, very different people, and yet you put them together, and they both can play this, spy serious comedy role, and they just vibe off each other incredibly well. But you're quite right. You're going into it. It's mostly a comedy with bits of action. But, or even, what else? Pineapple Express, or, God, it wasn't Hangover. There was another one he was in that I've completely forgot.
Jonah Hill, the Superbad is a
Superbad, that's the one. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, whenever you hear Jonah Hill's in it, you're like, okay, it's going to be funny.
Yeah, and I know that I've seen him in a couple of serious films as well, and he plays the serious part well. He does, he really does. But he's just a natural. He's one of those people that's naturally you're gonna like Seth Rogen. If you know he's gonna be in the film, it's gonna be funny. Even if it's a bit of or Jack Black or Zach Galifianakis. Let's say if Zach Galifianakis is in the film, I want to watch it.
Absolutely.
And I've seen a couple of turkeys that he's been in, but he's in it, and I know that I'm gonna get some laughs out of it, even if it's a turkey.
Absolutely, because he portrays that awkward funny. And I think that's it's so good. Yeah. He's found his niche, and he's mastered it so well. And it's like, you can put him in anything, and he will do an awkward, funny moment, even if he's not supposed to. And it's just
now,
him.
I tell you what, here's an interesting proposition or hypothesis. Imagine had he played the Leo role. Instead of Leo, you had Zach Galifianakis in that role, and he's a little bit too a little bit too out there, probably to be playing that role, that kind of awkward scientist, a little bit unsure of himself.
But I think in moments it would have been really good.
Yeah, definitely. You wouldn't have been confused about whether it was a comedy or not. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's weird because then I'm also thinking like Jesse Eisenberg in other moments would be quite good for it, or you could do Michael Cera, probably maybe not so much anymore, but because they have the very awkward thing down,
Well,
and then you mix in
absolutely,
awkward
absolutely.
humor, kind of like Zach Galifianakis, and then have little freak out moments. Leo's really good at freak out moments. He can do that kind of stuff. Like he's got it down.
Yeah.
But for the other parts, you definitely needed somebody else who could have really elevated that position.
Yeah. But Leo brings the audience in.
He does.
So,
It's
and it's
quite
nice.
right.
He's just nice to see him. I know he likes the flex, and that's good. And it's nice to see him in different roles. So that's a bit like Once Upon a Time in America. Brilliant, fantastic. A different type of role for him again, but fantastically. And that was kind of comedic as well, kind of a dark comedy.
Looking down.
But they both put in a fantastic performance. I mean, Brad Pitt he got the Oscar for that and deserved it, because I thought I think his role was just a brilliant role anyway. He played it really well, but it was just a fun character. I mean, any actor will be happy to take that role, just that badass, but he fit it perfectly. It was almost like written for him, it seemed to me.
Quite right.
Written for his personality.
Yeah, it's always good whenever they're able to get just the right person for a role. I think it makes just all the difference in the world, because you can get similar, you can get close, but when it's like you have nailed that person, it can really make or break a film.
Absolutely right. Oh, I've gone distant now. Sorry.
Yep.
Just feeding fine. Here we are. You want this? Yeah. Just feeding fine.
That's all right. That's quite all right.
A little bit of gloves, a little bit of supper. There we are. So, Valentine's Day tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a good way to timestamp when we did this.
It is. Also, it also presents a theme you can choose for what movies to recommend to watch for Valentine's Day.
I guess that's not a bad idea. Recommendations about stuff. I think, obviously, the theme of Valentine's Day is romance, or rom-com is another good second choice.
It'd have to be because what you were talking about, genres where you don't mind if you miss forever. Romantic movies. Actually, there have been some fantastic romantic movies. Really,
that's true.
Really,
that's
good
true.
ones.
Not to bash them, but it's for me, it's one of those things where once you've seen that one good one or a few good ones, I'm happy with that. I don't really care to see any others. Like if I do, unless it's another really good one, like those kind of like high level things to me, I'm probably not going to be interested, But that's the only problem. The only way you're going to know if it's good is if you actually watch it, because it's all down to personal taste at the end of the day. Like one of my favorite films of all time is called Your Highness, with Danny McBride and James Franco and stuff, and it's really stupid, goofy fantasy crap. Like it is a shit film.
Yeah.
Like completely, it is a shit film. It's not a good film.
I am familiar with it. I might have seen bits of it. I don't think I've seen it all the way through.
But I love it because it's one of my guilty pleasures, because back in the States with my roommates Billy and Justin, it's a film we all watched, and we doing some drinking and stuff at the time, and we all just we were laughing out loud the whole time. Probably mostly because we were drinking, but it became one of those moments where like, look, we're always going to quote and remember this film because we all really enjoyed it together, kind of thing. But in all fairness, as a film, it's not a good film. But it's a guilty pleasure kind of thing, and I think that's fine to have those.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, when you talk about this genre, and for blokes, that's probably where you're going to find some. That type of movies is a good fit. You're probably going to find films where you don't mind. We're not, they're not amazing films, or we don't really love them, but for to fit in with we always kind of enjoy for the romance side. That's it. I was going to say there's a couple of films kind of really, which are meant to be, classic romances. Like, for example, one of my all-time favourites, I suppose, although I haven't put it in my list of all-time favourites, but it deserves to be up there somewhere, is the Franco Zeffirelli version of Romeo and Juliet. And also, again, talking about Leo,
Yeah,
the modern version of Romeo and Juliet was
yeah.
pretty good, but I
I'm
personally
with you.
Franco Zeffirelli's version
I'm with you. I'm with
from
you.
the 1960s. It's very much of the time, but it's definitely worth a watch if you want to get in. If you're in the mood, a relationship mood, and you want to watch something kind of lovey-dovey, but also classic, a bit of based on a bit of classic literature. I just think it's a really nicely well put together piece of film craft.
No, that's that. I think it's good that we can, especially give recommendations on possible titles to watch for people, depending on how many people listen to this. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to have fun either
No,
way. But
exactly.
yeah, I guess we could list off some romance or some rom coms that we've enjoyed. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
pure romance, but has moments of comedy, but I wouldn't call it a comedy. Is The Notebook. That's one that I think is like super
yeah,
cliche, but I did
yeah,
really enjoy it back in the day because it
yeah,
does have a very touching and beautiful story, and even though the flashbacks, some of them are a bit far fetched and a bit out there and stuff, but I think that's just kind of part of the whole mad fantastical romance aspect kind of thing. It's one of those things where it's an unbelievable love story, and that's part of the driving point home for it. And no, I think overall it's definitely a film that I can recommend to others, and I can even say that I enjoyed it, even though it is like pure romance.
yeah. I'm looking at my list of favorite films, and I have got one by genre, but it's a pretty poor list. So there's only one film on that list that I really think that. No, there's a couple of films on that list, although I don't. This film is not really. I won't call it a romance. Really, it's more of a romp. I mean, it's classed. There's a romance in it. There's a romance theme kind of subplot in it, but it's kind of it's really more just of a general comedy, and that's The Quiet Man.
Quiet Man.
And what I was saying is that any movie buff, especially a movie buff who loves classic films, is or older films will recognise straight away. It's quite frequently shown on network, and even these days, you're going to find it fairly easily, and it's very popular because it's John Wayne, but not in in an untypical John Wayne role, playing a romantic lead, if you will. He's not, it is a romantic lead. It's not, but it's not so much a romance. It's just generally a comedy.
Yeah.
Based when he goes back to Ireland, he plays the part of a boxer, an American boxer who has some tragic thing going on in his life, and he goes back to his old family home, where his parents were born and brought up in Ireland, and it's just it's the funny, the kind of the culture clash between a modern day American coming into contact with the old fashioned style and slow kind of very quirky Irish village life. But there is the romantic subplot there with Maureen O'Hara playing the flame haired neighborhood, his neighbor from the neighboring farm, or the neighboring landlord is the daughter of that kind of property, or the sister of the property there. And yeah,
Right.
that is a lot of fun. If you haven't watched it, it's highly recommended. It's a lot of fun.
Well, there we go. We've already listed off three recommendations. That's pretty good. The Quiet Man. You've got The Notebook, and I've already forgot the first one. Oh no, Romeo and Juliet from
Romeo and Juliet,
1990s.
Zeffirelli's
Yep.
version. I mean,
Yep.
the Leo version from the 1980s, which was what's his face? Who directed that? Let's have a quick look. Remind myself, because it's a
Yeah,
famous director.
like you said, it was a modern spin on it, and it was just so goofy, so very goofy. I mean, just but funny to watch, and everybody was committed to the role, so you have to give them that. But if you haven't seen it, hilarious.
Pete Postlethwaite, Claire Danes were in there as well. Baz Luhrmann, that's it. Baz Luhrmann was the director. So he's more famous for what's Baz Luhrmann normally. His kind of stuff is.
Let's see if it links
he does
up.
kind of quirky stuff. He did Australia, and Moulin Rouge, and Gatsby, another Leo film. Strictly
Okay.
Ballroom. So there you go.
That all checks out.
He's known for these more kind of, again, we're talking about romance. Australia, right there. That's a kind of a classic romance type film, adventure, but with romance involved.
Great Gatsby about toxic romance.
Yeah, The Great Gatsby about toxic romance. Absolutely.
Yeah, Moulin
Strictly
Rouge.
Ballroom.
I mean, I wouldn't really call Moulin Rouge a romance. It's musical with a romance in it. But I suppose that's kind of like how rom-coms are or com-roms work in some senses. Especially a great example is almost so many Adam Sandler films. He does some version of a rom-com, but it's more comedy than it is romance. But it's still meant to be
Enjoy
quote
Moulin
unquote.
Rouge, I gotta
Yeah.
say.
Oh yeah, Moulin
I
Rouge
thought
is
it was a
good.
little bit over the top.
Oh yeah,
A
but I
little
think that
bit
was the point.
too much going on for me.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
that's
think
part
maybe
of
that
the
was
point,
the
isn't
point.
it? Yeah.
It was, but it was just a bit too busy for me. And also, I think same probably can be said for Romeo and Juliet. I mean,
Oh,
there are
100%.
people that love it, and recently I've been hearing critics say they absolutely love this film. I know your mum loves the film, but for me, it was just a little bit. It's a bit too much going on. It was all a bit fast paced. Couldn't
Mm,
kind of keep up with it. It's a little bit not quite my speed. I need
yeah,
things to slow down a little bit.
I get you. Especially in some kind of a romance thing. You're just like, look, I mean, if there's too much going on, then especially with subplots and crap like that, it's like, look, we're here for the one thing only. Whether it involves multiple characters or not, don't know. But it's you don't have to get lost in all this crazy sped up stuff because then it just feels like it's more of a drama than a romance. It just kind of changes entirely, and it just doesn't really work.
I just can't keep up with that type of movie. Really,
Yeah.
movies annoy me when I can't keep up with them. If I can't, there's so much going on, I just can't keep up with it unless it's something that's kind of hooked me, like Inception, for example. A lot of things going on there,
Oh, that's a
but
great example.
and why you have to watch it over and over again. But if it's grabbing you, if something about it is grabbing you, and you really can't, you're missing things, but you're not frustrated by the fact you're missing things because it's well, I'll go back and I'll revisit that and watch
Yeah,
that again
I'm
and
happy
see
to
what was going on
rewatch it
there.
and re-examine it and see what I thought about it a second, a third, a fourth time. Because, like a lot of people say, you'll pick up more this time. You'll have different conclusions and stuff. It's very interesting, and I agree with that point. I think you're completely right. Inception is a great example of a film that has too much going on, but it will hook you in, and you'll be like, well, I want to further understand kind of what's going on. I want to break it down a little bit if I can to really make sure I understand what's going on. But it's just so entertaining to watch.
Yeah, so I'm looking at some of these different movie websites, and we're not the only people that's had the idea of focusing a bit on romance
I'm not surprised, especially
because it's
this time of the year.
because it's Valentine. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I think we have to obviously talk about the classic Titanic.
Titanic. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's the only way you can really describe that movie. It's meant to, it's a romantic story that takes aboard a disaster. So it's like, at least it has a very interesting plot with the way it's able to develop and go along and stuff. So I really enjoyed that about it. How it's like, it's a romance, but there's terrible things that are going to happen, and it's ultimately, I mean, just doesn't work out, which is just insane. But like, what a way to portray it! What a way to portray it!
So you're saying that basically it's a Titanic was a real life, a real true story disaster, but the movie version of it is at least James Cameron's movie version of it is really more a romance with the subplot being the disaster.
Yeah, which is crazy because obviously the main plot should be the disaster, but it plays obviously until the end of the film. It plays such a little role because obviously that's the whole point. Is like it hits an iceberg, everything goes wrong. It's just a tragedy.
Yeah.
But otherwise, every other moment of the film is about it's about Leo and his story, and ultimately how it turns into his romantic interests and stuff. And it is all about that. So that's why I do believe it is.
Yeah.
Like you said, romance with the subplot is there's a tragic disaster of the Titanic sinking.
And you know what? You know who agrees with you? Rotten Tomatoes, because I've just looked up their categorization of Titanic, and they say it's a romance drama.
Yeah, that's it. It sounds about right. The main plot is romance. The second plot is drama.
Yep.
But it's the same with even the Adam Sandler rom-coms. It's comedy first, romance second. Even though it's meant to feel like the romance is the main part, it really isn't. It's just not interesting enough in a romance aspect to keep you be like, oh yeah, I'm so hooked to these characters. I want them to work out. You don't really care because you know what you're there for. It's Adam Sandler. It's going to be a goofy thing anyway. It's not really a rom-com. It's more of a comedy with a bit of a a love interest story intertwined. It's call it what it is.
So then taking it even further than that, I mean, we were talking about formula, our superhero movies, but certain genres movies become formula. I think action movies, I think slasher movies, films become quite formulaic.
Yeah.
Well, on a very general level, movies that there is a certain formula. So most movies, the vast majority of movies, always seem to have. There's always a love interest in there. Even when there doesn't need to be. Even when the story that you try to tell, the love interest really didn't happen, or it didn't happen in the way the film portrays it. But somehow it seems to be. Even with the comics, the comic stuff, the love interest, the romance element, that there's always a subplot that has to involve, a love interest coming into the main protagonist's life.
Very true.
And so there's always an element of romance in everything, even in the superhero stuff. And again, with this, going back to Spider-Man and his comics, he did have girlfriends in the comics, and it was Mary Jane, it was Gwen Stacy, and he was always having, difficult times mostly trying to get off with the girls, trying to get sum up the courage to go out with them. And then he dated them for certain later on in the comics, and when the comics became a little bit more mature and his character became a little bit more mature, he did start to date them. But in the early stages, in the early comics, he was just struggling to even some of the courage to ask them out. And when you see, if you look at the film, in the films that's not the case. In the films, to a large extent, maybe in the latest one, I suppose it is the case. He doesn't really get together with MJ. I think in the first movie he doesn't manage to get together with her.
Yeah,
and then in the second movie he starts to. And then it's kind of in most of those films the relationships are quite developed, whereas other aspects, in the comics they weren't. Those relationships just did not get developed until they were always kind of there, but they didn't get developed until well into I don't know, the 20th, 30th issues.
I suppose that's just,
I've got a pregnant pause there.
Yeah, but I suppose that's just how film adaptations go, isn't it? They're trying to give you the generalization of the character, the plot, the whole idea behind it, and tell it as quickly as they can in usually like a 2-hour time frame. Even though they're like, oh, well, we can have sequels and stuff. Well, it's like, well, hopefully, if this film does well enough, we can have sequels. It all depends. But you're quite right. It always annoys me in these superhero things how they're always like the romance is such a vital aspect of the character, and it's like, well, look, not all these characters need a romantic aspect. It's obviously, if it was the thing in the comics, fine, that makes sense. That's canon, it's part of the story. I get that. But then other ones, you feel like they still just try to force it on these characters, and it's just like it's just not needed. But I guess it's just become such a strange expectation these days that like every film has to have a level of romance, but it just doesn't.
So that's now, especially that would play into, and I can't think of an example, but I'm sure there are examples that plays into stuff that based on real life. So, for example, my genre that I like that I mentioned earlier, biopics. When they take when they're doing a biography of a real life person, historical character, and they're making a movie about him, but they have to kind of soup up maybe the romantic element of his or her life wasn't that amazing or that interesting, but they always in films they bring it to the fore a little bit because it is the formula of films that they have to do that. So that's quite comical. That's an area where sometimes biopics are not kind of true to life when they introduce. They'll say, "Oh no, there was this love interest going on, and it was that much more developed than it actually was." There are some examples. I can't think of one on top of my head, but there are definitely examples where it's kind of gone a bit stupid. Because they have to introduce a love interest to the character. They have to make it look like, oh, that was a big thing in his life when it really, or her life when it really wasn't.
Yeah, and I mean, in some cases, like maybe those characters did play a pivotal role enough that it's it warrants having those kind of things in. Like I think a good example of the biopic with that is the Elton John one with Taron Egerton, I think his name is, and fantastic Rocket Man. Fantastic film, like really, really enjoyable, great way to portray such a story and everything. And obviously, like he's got the two quote unquote love interests. He's got the one who's like his business partner, if you will, his writing partner, or whatever. And obviously, it's like, well, he's not gay, he's not into him like that, and so he does his little struggle with that. But then they come to terms with it, and that's all fine. He moves on, and then he's got the I guess it's the guy who becomes like his manager. I think it's played by Richard Madden. And, obviously, like, that was a love interest. That was important because it also was something that he had to rely on in order to continue doing his business and stuff. And yet, that was obviously... You can't just skip over that because, this character is important to his life, whether he was a love interest or not, because he was one of the people who helped, bring him up to a level of stardom, but he was also an abusive character and stuff. I think it's very important that when they are an important enough character, that it's fair to have the full portrayal of them. And for all we know, he might have had other love interests. Didn't really skim into too much of that, which I think is good. Because if they weren't very important to the story, it's good that it's probably don't need mentioning kind of thing.
Now, it's interesting you raised this one because that's one I've not actually seen, Rocket Man, but I might have to watch it now. It's on my list, but I'll bring it forward a little bit.
It is good. It is very good. Yeah, no, I definitely recommend it. It's very good.
It makes me think that then there's probably going to have to be a George Michael biopic coming soon, doesn't there? Somebody's got to be working on a George Michael biopic.
There must be a George Michael one coming. There must be on the works or something. They just probably haven't talked about it, but there's got to be.
Because that had to be an interesting life story. Talking about along these lines, his life was he had a very interesting life as a performer and as a celebrity. The things that he did, he got up to, and how his life went, and the twists and the turns he had to go through. I think that'll be that's one coming. That's for the prediction corner. We can have a prediction corner. What movies are coming out we've never heard of? We're going to suggest a project that is
we can have
we haven't
whatever
heard,
we
but
want.
it probably will
this
come
is,
out.
This is our project. We can do whatever we want with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. A prediction corner.
Exactly.
That's a good idea.
Prediction corner. I predict there's going to be a film about George Michael. I bet it's going to come out soon. Next couple of years. I've not heard of one yet, but it wouldn't surprise me.
No, I wouldn't be surprised either. So I think one thing we should do going forward that can be a segment in our podcast to help us gain a little bit of structure is we pick together, maybe even in the episode, we pick either a film or a TV show. We dictate how much of it we're going to see, but we both watch it during this week. That way we can make notes. We could even put it in the ideas and feedback text channel we've got here. And just to help keep track of this happened, so we have talking points and we can really dissect certain things if we want to. We can, name actors, other things they're useful for, and really kind of, it's just a good talking point, isn't it, for us to have cool opinions on something that could be really crap or really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like a little task we give ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm up for that. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That is a good idea.
It's perfect on this little server because we got the general where we can do our general chat, our general everything, and then the ideas and feedback is a whole separate one. So you click on that and it goes into a whole separate text channel, and you could just start listing off stuff, and that way we can refer back to it if we ever have we want a talking point we want to talk about at one point. Pop it in there. We'll have instant access to it when we come back to this.
Yeah. Okay. Have you got anything? Any ideas for something you want us to look at this week?
I haven't given it much thought yet. I'm just glad we got to this point, if I'm honest. But no, I think you're right.
What about some films that you've watched very recently? So, like yesterday, for example. Is that fresh in your mind? There's a couple that I watched. Recently. The last one that I watched was Predestination. That was watched that last night. And I gotta say, it was a very good film. Sci-fi from 2000. It said 2017, but the IMDb says 2014.
Oh right.
With Ethan Hawke playing a time traveler.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I was most taken by. It was a good story. It was great. It was just a great film, worth a watch. Original, interesting, and I was most taken by the performance of the actress Sarah Snook. I think she played a great part, fantastic part, and to the extent that I'm now looking for other stuff with her in deliberately because she was such a good actress.
Oh right, okay.
I thought.
I get you. Actually, yeah, I suppose I do have one that I can kind of talk about. I haven't finished it yet though. But I will, because it has really piqued my interest. So I do like to watch foreign films, especially if they're in a different language or made in a different country, especially, and you have to watch it with subtitles because it's you watch it with an English dub and sometimes it doesn't sound as good. But I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix, and I think it's called Big Bug, and it's a French film.
Big Bug, yeah. I've seen
about
that. I was going through the.
Yeah,
listings yesterday. I saw it.
I've seen about half of the film, because it is a decently long film. Like, you got to be ready for that. But it is very, very interesting. It has excellent levels of like comedy here and there, enough to keep you interested, but not too much that it feels like it's just a comedy. It's got a very interesting, like political, really thought-provoking things going on, which is quite nice. I'm not going to spoil too much for those who haven't seen it, because I still haven't even finished it, so I don't know exactly where it's going to go. But we can hopefully talk about it at one point. And it's got, I don't know any of the cast, because they're all, I'm assuming, French. They might not all be French. But no, it's quite frankly, if you want to watch something that is quite funny, but will make you kind of think a little bit, but it's goofy enough to keep you still interested with its story, especially like when you watch it, you'll understand why I say that. It's I do recommend it, and I've only seen half of it so far.
I was going through Prime. We were looking through, as we do, Prime, Netflix, and various other listings yesterday, looking for a film, and it was on the list. It caught my attention. It was one of the number of films that caught my attention that I did consider watching. But and now I know what it is, and I will now watch it, because quite apart from anything else, I noticed that it's directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who, among the various things that he has directed, he's directed Delicatessen. Now, that Delicatessen I've seen, and I watched that back in the 90s, and that was a particularly good film. It was one of the, there's not tons of French films I've seen. I've maybe seen a couple of dozen over the years, but Delicatessen is one, and definitely one of the best French films I've watched. I want to say, because I thought he also Alien, one of the less popular or less successful Alien movies. I think Alien 3 was because the thing about the Alien franchise is that I only kind of figured this out in the last few years, that they were all, each one was directed by a different director, but they were all very distinct. They're all good directors, top directors, but they had their own distinctive style, and so they brought their own style to it. So Ridley Scott, of course, he was the first and foremost, and now he's as the franchise has come back, he's kind of in control of it again. He brought out the original Alien, but the second Alien was by a different director. It was a big name at the time. Can't remember top of my head who it was, but similar sort of to James Cameron style. Very, very kind of, it's big blockbuster style. Still very good, but in a slightly different way to the first one.
Yeah.
And then Alien 3, I want to say it was Jean-Pierre Jeunet. It might not be, but I'm going to just take a quick look now, because I'm sure the guy that directed Delicatessen, brilliant film, and I recommend it. Take that away as something, if you like foreign films and you like doing subtitle films and going through that at a minute, have a look at Delicatessen, because it's definitely worth it. I just want to have a quick look and see if he is the same director as I thought he was.
So
you'll notice some of the same troupe of actors, and you'll notice some of the same style in the film.
Okay, that's good to know.
As it is in Delicatessen.
Yeah,
it is.
So he did.
Oh no, that Delicatessen is Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Let's have a look if he did Alien 3. Hold on a second. I don't know if he did Alien 3. We'll see in a minute.
So another
might be wrong about that.
Another French film that I do recommend, which is also kind of a comedy. I think it's mostly a comedy, but it's got a cool story to it. It's called I don't know the French translation, but I know the English. It's Two Alone in Paris, and it's basically like a cop and robber situation, but they end up like some weird thing happens, and they are like all alone, just the two of them, like in all of Paris by themselves, and it's just quite interesting to see, because I think it just like has flash moments where like they come from like normal life to that bizarre life, but everything looks the same just without people, and it's just it has plenty of good humor moments. It is very good.
Yeah, I think I've seen that listed recently. That's gained my interest and attention.
It's definitely
as well.
good.
So I'll definitely put that on the list.
Otherwise,
now I'm wrong about Alien 3. It wasn't the director, so
could it have been Alien Resurrections then? Because that feels a bit goofier.
No, I've somehow got confused here. I think I don't know where I've got
what
I'm thinking of.
It's fair enough.
Because Alien Resurrection was Alien 4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it? Or was it?
Yeah. Alien 4. That's right. I mean, it was just a very different film entirely. Just I don't really know what they were doing with that. Like at least the first three Aliens, like that felt like they're all connected. It makes sense.
It is. Sorry, I take it back. It is Alien Resurrection. He did direct that.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. I can absolutely see that. How they're both profound,
very unique,
and yet goofy. Yeah, unique is a good word for it. Yeah. But no, I'd rather watch Big Bug because Alien Resurrection is just it. Unique is a good word for it, but I don't think I'd watch it again. It just was just too strangely out there.
Yeah.
But other
Well,
foreign
I'll take a look
films.
at Big Bug for sure.
Oh yeah.
I'll take a
No.
look at Big Bug.
Okay,
I would recommend. I would say take a look at Predestination and
okay.
Delicatessen if you want to, but Predestination because that's yeah, I definitely recommend that. I think you'll enjoy that.
Okay, hang on. Predestination, Delicatessen, Big Bug. So if I just pop a couple of those in our thing, then that way I can remember. Because, yeah, I think maybe next week we can talk about Big Bug. We'll try to watch that this week. And I'll see if I can watch Predestination or Delicatessen as well. So that way we've got at least 2 things that we can talk about straight away, which is pretty good. Otherwise, I know like the Korean films have become like far more in the spotlight these days. Even Korean television shows like on Netflix and things like that, they've really started coming to the limelight, and some of them are absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
to watch.
Totally agree. Is Ju-on the TV series? Is that Korean or is it Japanese? I think it's Japanese, isn't it?
Ju-on, I think that's Japanese, yeah. Because I think that's because I think it's the Grudge, isn't it? Ju-on, or is that a different word? There's so many different words.
Yeah, the Grudge.
Yeah. I think that is Japanese, but I know what you mean by that. It's similar kind of stylings and stuff. But no, I think Korean wise, like one of their biggest ones recently was I think it's called Parasite. And if you haven't seen that,
I'm just looking at it now. I love it. It's fantastic. Have you not seen it?
Oh, I've seen it. Oh, what a film.
Have you not seen it?
I've seen it.
I've seen it. I thought it was brilliant.
Oh, what a fantastic. I mean, great plot, great story. So much excitement in the film. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Brilliant film. Well done. Well done in every way. Well acted, well scripted, well directed. Just everything.
Everything about it was just right. Just right.
Superb film.
Well, and that's going to lead me onto Squid Game then, the television series on Netflix. Have you seen that?
No, I've not. I've seen it listed and I've thought about it, but I've not watched it yet.
Highly recommend. I know a lot of people probably say that, but if you liked Parasite in how it had a good story, it was well scripted, well acted, you're gonna like Squid Game for that exact same reason. It is just
okay.
It is incredibly unique and it is incredibly well done.
Okay, well that's on my list then.
And then I think we've also seen on Netflix. It was called The Silent Sea. I think it was called. Where
I saw it. I haven't seen it, but I saw it listed. I keep looking, thinking I want to watch it.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. Where basically, I don't want to call them a research team, but they are basically a research and rescue team. Get sent back to a base that they have on the moon, because they had a facility there, and supposedly a radiation leak happened on the moon. Yeah, because that makes total sense. And like everybody on the base died, and they left it alone for like 5 years, and so they ended up sending a research and rescue team to kind of find out what happened and see what stuff they can gather back from it and everything. It's quite an interesting story, quite good.
Now, if you're talking about there's been out on Netflix series, one that we've watched recently that I really enjoyed, which is also kind of in a similar vein, would be Archive 81. If you haven't seen that one.
Oh, that was really good. Archive 81, yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely my kind of thing.
That was good, wasn't it?
It was fantastic. I mean, you've got the whole... Because I've always enjoyed the idea of found footage, but the only problem with the found footage series is you never know what kind of camera work they're going to do. It can always be shoddy or quick, like you've got Blair Witch Project or Cloverfield, where some scenes are really good and then other scenes you have no idea what's going on and it just really ruins it. But with Archive 81, you didn't really get any of that. The story was great. It was told from like 2 different angles and timelines and stuff.
Yeah.
It was if anybody listening hasn't seen it on Netflix, Archive 81, you have to see it if you're really into something that's kind of culty. It's kind of spooky, but it's not like overly scary. It's just like creepy, weird, but it's gripping. It's a really good story.
And kind of
detective-y, mystery kind of thing. You've cut out. Give me 1 sec. I'll see if I can get you back.
and things like that, because I'm fascinated in that anyway, in going through bits of that. So, for example, there's a couple of examples I can think of where there's plays or stories or films or TV series about archivists going through huge collections of photographs trying to solve the mystery. Even I want to say the girl with the dragon tattoo. I'm sure that started off.
I could have had an element of that. Yeah, I could see that.
At the start, well, there's a mysterious photograph that he's trying to figure out what's going on. I'm sure that was the girl with the dragon tattoo. I'm not sure.
That sounds about right. I think you're right on that. Or another one is I suppose he's not exactly archiving, but he's using old evidence. Was Insidious, the horror film? That's got like an element of that where he's finding old tapes and watching them. And I mean that was quite a good story, quite creepy, quite gory as well. Though.
Film.
Yeah,
that's for me. In terms of some of the poster boys, or not poster boys, but the kind of standout examples of the genre. I think Insidious is one of those for the ghost horror genre. I think that's one of the best.
Oh wait, am I thinking
films?
Am I thinking Insidious or am I thinking Sinister?
You might be thinking, Sinister is what you're thinking of. That's one way, but there's a projector in that going through.
Yeah, Sinister. That's it. Yeah. Although you're right about Insidious being like absolutely genre defining in its own way with the whole like demonic possession and stuff like that. Fantastic film as well. It felt like it had elements of Poltergeist in it, and yet it wasn't too much like Poltergeist that you're like, it's just a rip-off.
No, it was no. But again, for me, one of the better ghost films out there.
Absolutely.
Most people these days, I'm sure, would have seen it, but anybody who's a fan of the genre must have seen it. If you are a fan of the genre and you haven't seen it, then
then you're missing out. Exactly.
What are you doing? And take a look. Excellent.
Yeah. No. So that's basically all there is to it. It's pretty good fun.
Yeah, it is fun, and it's a good conversation for a Sunday evening.
That's quite right.
To start the week.
That's quite right. We can even have on guests who, in case there's like certain films that other people are really interested in talking about. We could do. That's the beauty. We could just structure it however we want. Do what we like. It's our show.
Yeah. Right, and see if we can find famous just actors who are in, or not necessarily famous, but maybe smaller role actors from films and things like that. We can
do our own little interviews and stuff. Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
That would be fun.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting, wouldn't
it? From our massive repertoire list that we have, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, sounds good. Right,
Actually, thinking about it, I do know, before we leave, I do know an actor, Mark Ashworth, that used to come into Cafe Movieland when I was in Cornwall. Well, he came in a couple of times for a brief period, and he's an actor in the States. He's been in lots of huge blockbusters as a small part actor. I mean, he's on IMDb. He's in hundreds. So it's called Mark Ashworth, if you look him up on IMDb. But he's been in some big titles, in some big films. Small parts in big films.
That's
and I bet if I asked him, he's actually based in Atlanta now. But if I asked him to, I bet he'd come join us for a session.
That'd be pretty fun.
Just to give us a little bit of kudos.
That's not a bad idea.
Guy.
Yeah, I'm down for that idea. Give him a reach out.
All right, I may get in touch with him.
Sounds good. Right, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think that was cool. We got plenty of time in there. Got a lot of things. We got a good conversation started. We get some ideas for format. I think that's going to evolve.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I like it. I enjoyed that. It's fun.
Fantastic.
We can do that.
I'll tell you what. We'll have to do like a little like at the start. We'll have to do like a little news segment or something where we talk about like recent films coming out or any actor news or something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what kind of gels. If there's any like really good ones that are coming out, that'd be quite good.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. We'll try around some ideas. See what works. See what sticks. We can always modify as we like anyway.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for listening, everybody. We hope you've enjoyed our very first Dick About episode, and we'll come back next week and we'll see about talking about Big Bug, hopefully Delicatessen, maybe some television shows and stuff. And hopefully in the future we'll have Mark Ashworth on with us. That'd be really cool. Until then, we'll see you next week. Take care.
Yeah. Take care. Have a great week. Watch lots of films. Yeah, bye bye.